We have Greg here from Methven Professionals. Greg, thank you for joining us on the new property show. Real estate, you've been in the industry for quite some time now, 25 years.
Yep.
Do you mind just sort of taking us back to what, I guess, inspired your passion to join the real estate industry?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having us on your show. I guess probably I was born into it, Stephen. Our business has been going for 60 years. My grandfather started our business. So I've grown up with it my whole life. I've been in the business 25 years, but property, real estate, we're in the outer east of Melbourne, and I guess discussions around our family dining room table over the years have always been property related.
What age were you getting out and actually checking out properties, doing open for inspections? Were you in the car with mum, dad, your grandfather, actually out on site back then?
I guess probably you just grow up with it. So I mean, even as in my early child years, we were going out putting up the sale signs and those sort of things. But probably more as I got older. I bought my first property when I was 20, yeah, just growing up with it. So just part of what we did.
There's been a lot of, I guess, buzz in the industry at the moment around real estate.
Yep.
A lot of people are buying, selling, refinancing. Where are you seeing, I guess, the hype of the activity in your, I guess, your version of the industry? What's happening?
Been a huge buzz, and I think probably the boom that we experienced during COVID, no one expected that. But the other thing is the boom, really in essence, we've had strong market conditions for probably close to 30 years. Yes, there's been a few ups and downs, but I think the market has been that strong for that period of time that it's almost been seen as the normal, and the last couple of years certainly added to that. Now there's a big change in the market. Obviously interest rates is having a big effect. Employment, we're at full employment as well at the moment, so people have been spending, but things are starting to change. So for the first time, and a lot of people that are in probably their mid-40s and younger have never seen a market change to where it is now, and prices starting to come back.
With, I guess, buying, how has that changed in the last couple of years? So with my experience in the industry, a lot of people were just driving out to display homes, they were turning up for open for inspections, and a lot of my clientele were coming, I guess, from a 30 to 50 kilometre radius. Has that changed now, and how are people purchasing? You're seeing a lot more online inquiries, or I guess the strategy's changed for buying a home?
I think probably the biggest shift is probably dollar driven. So if you take the first home buyer market as an example, so a first home buyer might have a budget or a spending capability to, let's say, $700,000. Well, the reality is if they want to buy a home, you can't get a $700,000 home, close to the city. So, those buyers certainly have had to have branched out, and whether that's, call it around the ring of Melbourne. But that's probably been the biggest shift. Where they find the property, I think that hasn't changed over the last period of time. Obviously your realestate.com, your internet. Social media is a big player. That's probably been one of the biggest shifts from a estate agent's marketing point of view, that now we'll promote property on social media, and that probably, if anything, that's replaced the local papers.
Okay, and do you actually use social media yourself to promote, or have you got a team that promotes that for you?
Correct.
Do you run that through a story or simply like a post, or how does that work?
Yeah, so combination, we use an external social media marketing company, then we do our own internal marketing also, and then we've got our own in-house video team as well. So, so the beauty of social media is you might know someone that's looking to buy a property, you mightn't be looking yourself, but you can find a property, you can tag it, share it, and away it goes.
Beautiful. So you basically create a team of mini agents that are on the ground for you.
Correct.
That like, know and trust you, helping you, support you. I'd like to cover, if we can, the rental market. Obviously noticed at the moment rental prices are kind of skyrocketing. Yep. To get into a rental property, you kind of need to know somebody. Sometimes you've got to buy and sell through the same agency to get approved.
Yeah.
What's happening in the rental market?
It's probably the toughest I've ever seen it. So we manage a substantial number of properties in the outer east. Our vacancy rate would be the lowest I've ever seen. I'm talking in 30, 40 years. So I think it's a combination of a number of things. I think with the market doing what it did as far as property values, investors looked at it and thought, you know what, now's the time to perhaps cash out. So a lot of them have elected to sell their properties. So that's brought your stock levels down. Also, I think perhaps some of these rules that the state government has brought in around residential tenancies and how that affects in particular landlords. I think a lot of landlords are probably put off by some of those changes and are a little bit alarmed and scared as a result of those changes and actually having an investment property. So what we've seen is a lot of landlords have elected to cash out to sell their property. A lot of landlords haven't been buying back in, and it's created a huge shortfall. And unfortunately, probably the rules that the government brought in to protect the tenants, those same rules are actually probably hurting the tenants now because of the lack of stock available.
What about, I guess, house sharing or coexisting or Airbnbs? Are you starting to see those properties starting to come back on the market now because affordability is getting pretty tough? There's one person registering on a lease, and then you're finding when you go to turn up, there's 3 or 4 different people living there. Does that still happen?
Well, not as much as that we're aware of, put it that way. Not that I'm saying it doesn't happen. The Airbnb market, I think that's probably more for regional Victoria. I know the Airbnb or that holiday market is definitely affecting your regional market, and long-term rental properties are really hard to find. I think probably in the outer east of Melbourne where I'm based, I don't think that's so much of an issue. But as far as people house sharing and that, no doubt people were doing it because obviously the rents are coming back. The other thing that's interesting is people, when they're applying, a property might be advertised at $450 a week, but due to the demand and the amount of people that are looking, some tenants are coming in and offering $480 a week, or I'll pay 12 months up front. And they're just some of the things that tenants are doing in order to secure a property.
All right, so here's the biggest question I'm sure everybody on the show wants to know.
Yep.
How do you make money in real estate?
Buy, hold, ideally don't sell. I think you got to look at property as a long-term proposition. I think you can play the market, but people say to me, when's the market at the top? Should I sell when it gets to the top? But the reality is no one knows. No one waves the flag when the market hits the top. Just like, for people that are looking to buy, maybe you're waiting for the real estate market to get to the bottom, you're not going to know when the bottom will be.
The race to the bottom, it never happens.
Correct. Yeah. So I think if you just got to treat it as a long-term game. I know property developers will have a different thought around that, but that's a different space. But for the general mum and dad, I think if they're buying an investment property, buy and just hang on to it.
What about let's just dig a little bit deeper. Let's go for a mum and dad, or just a young ambitious person that's got a bit more of a budget.
Yep.
They might have that 700 to 1.2, 1.4 million.
Yep.
What about buying a bigger block of land and subdividing it? You've done some projects, I guess, yourself.
Yep.
Do you want to talk us through what that might look like?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good strategy. So in essence, you could buy, if you're taking the outer east of Melbourne, you might be able to buy a block of 900 to 1,000 square metres. It might cost you anywhere from 8 to 900,000. You can put a tenant into that property, you can rent it out. While you're renting it out though, you then work to then get an approved plan and permit to subdivide that property. By the time that might take 12, 18 months, 2 years, let's say, by the time you then build. And generally if you sit down and do the numbers, the cost that it actually costs to build the unit at the back, and then when you finance that, the rent will cover that, and you've probably made an equity of about 100 to 150,000 in equity, and then you'll also still got your front home as well.
And would you suggest typically a corner block, would you like that, or a wide frontage? What's your preference out of the two?
Either. Look, corner blocks are always ideal, but you're going to pay more for a corner block as well, because obviously you'll get the unit that you build facing out onto the street. So, if you can get a corner block, great, but at the end of the day, you will pay extra for a corner block above, another dual lock type property.
Beautiful. Greg, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been really interesting topics. Loved hearing that the answer on making money in real estate. This show's here to help people, and thank you again for joining.
You're welcome, Steve. Thanks for having us. Thank you.